Disclaimer. This story is told like a real experience. Some details have been slightly changed for privacy and storytelling purposes. However, the events described are presented exactly how they were reported. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story comes from someone who claims they worked as a seasonal ranger in a remote national park in the western United States. What happened during one of their night patrols is something they say they still can't explain even years later. If you enjoy true crime, disturbing mysteries, and realistic horror stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more content like this. And if you enjoy this series, give the video a like. It really helps the channel grow and lets us keep bringing you more stories like this. And make sure you check out some of our other videos after this one if you enjoy this type of content. Alright, now let's jump in. I was a seasonal ranger in a national park during the summer of 2019. At the time, it felt like the perfect job. I had just graduated college and didn't really know what I wanted to do next. A friend of mine told me the National Park Service was hiring seasonal staff to help with patrols, trail checks, and campground security. The park I was assigned to was enormous, over 2,000 square miles of wilderness, mountains, rivers, thick forests, the kind of place where you could drive for an hour and never see another person. During the day, the park was beautiful. Families hiking trails, campers sitting around fires, photographers taking pictures of the mountains. But the longer I worked there, the more I noticed something strange about the older rangers. They hated night patrols. Not just disliked them, hated them. Whenever night patrols were mentioned in the ranger station, the atmosphere changed. The older rangers would exchange quick looks. Sometimes someone would make a joke. Other times, the room would go quiet. One night while we were finishing paperwork, I asked Ranger Collins about it. Collins had worked in the park for almost 15 years. "Why does everyone hate night patrols so much?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a moment. Then he said something strange. "Because the park isn't the same place after midnight." I laughed, but he didn't. About a week later, I was scheduled for my first night patrol. Collins handed me a radio, a flashlight, and the keys to one of the ranger trucks. "You'll be checking the southern trails tonight," he said. "Anything I should know?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said something that made absolutely no sense at the time. "If you hear someone calling for help off the trail," he paused, "don't go after them." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Just stay on the trail." Driving through the park at night felt completely different from the daytime. During the day, the forest was full of sound, birds, wind moving through the trees, people talking on hiking trails. But at night, everything felt wrong. The ranger truck headlights barely reached the trees. Beyond that was nothing but darkness. Around midnight, I reached a trailhead called Ridge Hollow. It was one of the more remote trails in the park. Only one car was parked there. That wasn't unusual. Some people liked hiking at night. Still, something about the place felt strange. The forest was silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking down the trail. About 15 minutes into the hike, I heard something. At first, I thought it was an animal. Then I heard the words, "Help me." The voice was faint, and it wasn't coming from the trail. It was coming from somewhere deep in the forest. "Please, help." It sounded like a woman. My first instinct was to step off the trail. But then I remembered Colin's warning. If you hear someone calling for help off the trail, don't go after them. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I think I hear someone calling for help near Ridge Hollow Trail. Static filled the radio. Then dispatch responded. Unit 12, stay on the trail. The voice came again. Help me. But something about it was wrong. The tone hadn't changed. The pitch was identical. It sounded exactly the same, like a recording repeating itself. Then a branch snapped behind me. I turned quickly. The trail behind me was empty, but then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, moving slowly through the forest. But they weren't coming from the direction of the voice. They were behind me, following the trail, keeping pace with me. My chest tightened. Dispatch, I whispered. I think someone is moving through the forest near me. There was a pause. Then dispatch responded quietly. Unit 12, return to your vehicle immediately. As I backed down the trail, I heard the voice again. Help me. But now it sounded distorted, like multiple voices layered together. Then I saw something, about 30 yards ahead, between two trees, a tall shape, too tall to be a person. It stood completely still, watching me. When my flashlight hit it, the shape slipped behind the tree and disappeared. That was the moment I ran. Branches snapped behind me. Something was moving through the forest, keeping pace with me. The voice echoed through the trees. Help me, help me, help me. But now it sounded wrong, almost mocking. When I finally reached the parking lot, I jumped into the ranger truck and locked the doors. The headlights illuminated the trees. And then, something stepped forward from the forest, just enough to be seen. It was tall, much taller than a person. Its arms hung unnaturally low. It stood there silently, watching the truck. Then it stepped back into the darkness and disappeared. A few days later, I was organizing incident records at the ranger station. That's when I noticed something disturbing. Several missing person cases had happened near the same trail system, Ridge Hollow. Many of them disappeared at night, and several witnesses reported hearing someone calling for help in the forest. Always the same words. Help me. Another ranger named Mark told me something strange. Years earlier, a ranger had gone missing during a night patrol on that exact trail. His final radio transmission had been recorded. Mark played it for me. At first it sounded normal. Then a faint voice appeared in the background. Help me. The exact same voice I had heard. Then the ranger said something else. I see someone between the trees. The recording ended there. He was never found. A week later, I was assigned another night patrol. Same area, Ridge Hollow. When I arrived, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no hikers, just the forest. About 20 minutes into the trail, I heard the voice again, but this time something was different. Another voice answered it from deeper in the forest. Help me. Two voices, repeating the same words, back and forth. Later that night, Collins told me something he never wrote in any report. Dozens of people had disappeared in that park over the years. Most were explained. Accidents, getting lost. But a few cases had one detail in common. Witnesses heard someone calling for help in the forest before the disappearance. Always the same words. Always off the trail. Help me. Before the season ended, Collins gave me one last piece of advice. People think the dangerous part of the park is the animals, he said. Bears, wolves, mountain lions. He shook his head. The dangerous part is when the forest starts talking. Because in a park that large, with miles of wilderness, there are places where people rarely go. And if something learned how to imitate human voices, it could live there for decades, waiting, calling, listening for someone to answer. And sometimes, late at night, rangers still hear it, from somewhere deep in the forest, whispering the same words. "Help me." Something stepped forward from the forest, just enough for the headlights to reach it. For a moment, my brain refused to understand what I was looking at. The figure was standing at the edge of the trees, half in the darkness and half in the light from the truck. It was tall, much taller than any person. At first I thought maybe it was just someone standing on a rock or a fallen log. But then it moved, slowly. And the way it moved didn't look human. Its arms hung strangely low, almost reaching its knees. Its posture was wrong, like its joints bent slightly in places they shouldn't. The figure didn't step fully into the light. It just stood there, watching the truck, watching me. Even from that distance, I could feel the weight of its presence, like it knew I was inside the vehicle. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the keys when I tried to start the engine. The truck roared to life and I threw it into reverse. As the vehicle backed away, the headlights shifted across the trees. For a split second, the light hit the figure again. But this time, it was gone. There was nothing there, just empty forest. When I got back to the ranger station, Ranger Collins was already there. It was almost 3 a.m. I must have looked completely shaken because the moment I walked through the door, he asked one question. "You heard it, didn't you?" I didn't even need to ask what he meant. "The voice," I said. Collins nodded slowly. Then he motioned for me to sit down. I told him everything. The voice in the forest, the footsteps following me, the shape between the trees, and the figure that stepped into the headlights. Collins listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You're not the first ranger to report that," he said. Collins walked over to a filing cabinet near the wall and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were printed reports, search and rescue records, missing person cases. Most national parks have incidents like that. People get lost, people wander off trails. But Collins pointed to something specific. Nearly a dozen missing persons cases over the past 20 years had happened in the same general area, Ridge Hollow, and several of the witness reports mentioned something strange. Before the disappearances, someone had heard a voice in the forest, calling for help, always the same words. "Help me." Collins flipped through the papers until he stopped on one report. "This one happened about 9 years ago," he said. It was another ranger, a man named Thomas Carter. He had been doing a routine patrol of the same trail, Ridge Hollow. According to the report, Carter radioed dispatch saying he heard someone calling for help in the woods. Just like I had, he said he was stepping off the trail to investigate, and then nothing. His radio signal suddenly cut out. Search teams spent 3 days combing the forest, dogs, helicopters, volunteers. They never found Carter, not even a footprint. Collins looked at me for a moment. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "We still have the last recording from his radio." He led me into a small office in the back of the ranger station. There was an old computer connected to a speaker. Collins opened a file and pressed play. At first, the recording sounded normal. You could hear Carter speaking calmly over the radio. "Dispatch, I hear someone calling for help near Ridge Hollow Trail." Then there was silence for a few seconds, and then a faint voice in the background. "Help me." My entire body went cold. It was the exact same voice I had heard, same tone, same pitch. Then Carter spoke again, but this time his voice sounded nervous. "I see someone between the trees." There was a loud burst of static, and the recording ended. The next week, I couldn't stop thinking about Ridge Hollow. I checked old reports when I had free time. I found 3 different missing hiker cases, 2 injured campers who couldn't explain how they'd gotten so far from the marked route, and 1 report from a volunteer searcher who quit after saying he heard someone whisper his name from inside the trees. Most of those reports never made it into anything public. They were buried in paperwork because on paper, the park had reasonable explanations for all of them: exposure, disorientation, falls, animal activity. But the more I read, the more one detail kept showing up in little side notes and handwritten comments. Voice heard off trail. The longer I worked there, the more I started noticing things the older rangers did without talking about them. Nobody patrolled Ridge Hollow alone if they could avoid it. Nobody stepped off that trail at night. And nobody, not once, joked about hearing a voice in the forest. Then I got scheduled there again. I considered asking Collins to change the route, but pride got in the way. I didn't want to be the seasonal kid who panicked over one bad patrol. So I took the assignment. This time, I reached Ridge Hollow a little after 1 in the morning. The parking lot was empty. No sedan, no photographers, no hikers. Just the trailhead sign, the gravel lot, and the tree line beyond it, looking black enough to absorb the headlights. I stayed in the truck longer than I should have, listening to the engine idle. The radio hissed softly on my shoulder. Every part of me was hoping dispatch would interrupt with some other call so I could leave and deal with anything else in the world. Nothing came through. So I got out, checked the flashlight, and went back down the trail. The forest felt wrong immediately, like I had stepped into a place already aware of me. That sounds dramatic, and I know how that sounds, but I don't know a better way to describe it. The air was cold in a way that didn't match the season. My footsteps sounded too loud. The beam of the flashlight seemed weaker than it had any right to be. I reached the spot where I thought I had first heard the voice on the previous patrol and stopped for maybe 30 seconds. There was nothing. Then I heard movement to my left, a slow, dragging sound, not quite footsteps, more like something brushing against bark as it moved between trees. I keyed the radio. Unit 12 at Ridge Hollow, continuing on foot. Dispatch answered immediately this time. Copy. I don't know why, but that simple response calmed me a little. Then the voice came again. Help me. This time it was closer than before. Not much. Maybe 10 yards off the trail. I froze and angled the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Then, from deeper in the woods farther ahead, another voice answered. Help me. I remember actually whispering, "No," out loud when I heard that second one, because it killed the last part of my brain still trying to explain it rationally. It wasn't one lost person. It wasn't an echo. It was 2 separate sources repeating the same phrase back and forth like they were signaling each other. The first voice came again. Help me. Then the second. Help me. Identical tone. Identical pacing. I started backing up. That's when I heard footsteps on the trail behind me. I turned. At first I didn't see anything. Then the flashlight found a shape farther down the trail than I expected, maybe 40 feet back. It was standing directly in the middle of the path, tall, thin, head tilted slightly to one side, and perfectly still. The thing about fear is that sometimes it doesn't make you scream or run right away. Sometimes it just strips away all the extra thoughts until only one remains. Mine was simple. If it's on the trail now, it wants me trapped between the trail and the trees. The figure took one slow step forward. I ran, not back toward it, off to the side, around a bend in the trail where the terrain dropped slightly and the path widened for a few yards before climbing toward the parking lot. I could hear movement crashing through the woods to my right and left again, keeping pace the way it had before. But now there was another sound under it all. Breathing. Not mine. Something breathing hard and wet, somewhere close to the edge of the flashlight beam. I slammed the radio button with my thumb and shouted, "Unit 12 needs immediate backup at Ridge Hollow." Immediate backup! Static exploded in my ear. Then a voice came through, weak and broken. "Stay on the trail, stay on the trail, stay on the trail." I don't know if it was the dispatcher or the radio clipping the same transmission over and over, but it sounded terrified. I rounded the last curve before the parking lot and almost fell because someone was standing there. For one insane split second, I thought it was another ranger coming in from the lot. Then the flashlight hit it. It was too tall. Again too tall, but now closer than I had ever seen it. The body was narrow enough that it almost looked starved. The shoulders were strange, angled in a way that made the arms hang too far out from the torso before dropping. I couldn't make out a face. Not really. But I could tell the head was turned toward me. And then, in a perfect copy of my own voice from half a second earlier, it said, "Immediate backup." I don't think I've ever felt fear like that, not before or since. Hearing the phrase wasn't the worst part. Hearing it in my voice was. I stumbled backward, swung the flashlight, and the beam skipped off the trees for a second. When it came back, the thing wasn't in front of me anymore. It was somewhere in the dark to my right, and whatever had been pacing me through the woods on the other side was suddenly much closer. I don't remember making the decision to run. I just remember the parking lot appearing through the trees, and the feeling that if I slowed down even once, something would touch my back. I made it to the truck, got inside, hit the locks, and looked up. There were no headlights in the lot, but mine. No backup, no people. For maybe 3 seconds, everything was still. Then, at the far edge of the lot, just beyond the wash of the headlights, I saw more than one shape. Not clearly, not enough to count exactly, but enough to know the first one hadn't been alone. Tall silhouettes standing in the trees where the light stopped. One of them lifted its head slightly and called out, in that same woman's voice, "Help me." Another answered deeper in the woods, then another, then one, from much closer than the others, softly said my first name. I had never said my name over the radio that night. I drove before I fully understood that. The tires sprayed gravel. I took the service road too fast, almost slid on one of the turns, and didn't stop until I saw the station lights. When I got out, Collins and another ranger were already outside. Apparently, my last transmission had come through badly enough that dispatch heard panic, but not details. I told them everything, every piece of it. The second voice, the footsteps on the trail, the thing copying my radio call, the shapes at the edge of the parking lot, one of them using my name. The other ranger, a guy named Ortega, looked sick by the time I finished. Collins didn't look surprised at all. He just looked tired. He sent Ortega away, then walked me back inside and poured coffee neither of us really drank. After a minute, he said, "That's new." "What is?" "It copying you." I stared at him. He nodded once. used to just be cries for help. Then names, sometimes. Mostly from searchers who stayed too long in one place. But copying a radio call, that's new. I asked him why the park hadn't closed the trail at night if they knew any of this. He gave me the same answer institutions always give, when they want to sound practical while hiding something uglier underneath. Because officially, we don't know any of this. Officially, people got lost. Officially, audio in the woods played tricks on people. Officially, fear made witnesses unreliable. He opened another report file and showed me a handwritten note attached to a search operation from years earlier. Do not follow voices. If voice uses your name, return immediately. I asked who wrote it. Carter, Collins said. That meant Thomas Carter had known something was wrong before he disappeared. Maybe not enough, but enough to leave a warning. I finished the season, but I never patrolled Ridge Hollow again. Collins arranged that without making it obvious. 2 weeks later, I packed my things and left the park. I wish I could say that was the end of it. It wasn't. For months after I got home, I'd wake up at night convinced I had heard someone outside my apartment whispering for help. Once, while taking out the trash behind my building, I heard a woman's voice somewhere beyond the fence say, "Help me!" And I actually dropped the bag and ran inside before realizing it was probably a television from an open window. Probably. A year later, Collins called me. I hadn't heard from him since I left, so seeing his number shocked me enough that I almost didn't answer. He got straight to the point. Another ranger had reported hearing the voice at Ridge Hollow. Not unusual. What was unusual was what happened next. According to Collins, the ranger had started back toward the trailhead after hearing it. Halfway out, he heard someone ahead of him on the trail say, in the dispatcher's voice, "Stay on the trail." The problem was dispatch hadn't transmitted anything. I asked Collins why he was telling me that. There was a long pause on the line before he answered. Because it's learning faster now. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. A few months later, I heard through another seasonal employee that Collins retired early. No reason given, just gone. I've thought about Ridge Hollow more times than I want to admit. The part that bothers me most isn't the height of the figure, or the way it moved, or even the fact that more than one of them might have been standing in the tree line that second night. It's the purpose behind it. Predators chase, storms destroy, accidents happen. But whatever was in those woods was doing something more patient than any of that. It was luring, testing, repeating exactly the thing a decent person would respond to without thinking. A voice asking for help. And if that stopped working, it adapted. A second voice, a familiar name, a copied radio call. Maybe that's why the older rangers hated night patrols so much. Not because they were afraid of something simple and physical in the woods, but because they knew there was something out there that understood enough about human beings to use kindness against them. So if you ever find yourself on a trail at night, and you hear someone in the trees quietly asking for help, remember this. Not every voice wants to be found. Sometimes the thing calling you into the dark already knows exactly what to say. And according to the men and women who still work in that park, if you stop on Ridge Hollow after midnight and listen long enough, the forest still whispers. Sometimes in a woman's voice, sometimes in a child's, sometimes in your own. Help me.